It is very shameful for people, to demand or to require trust from other people while they themselves do not have the trust, do not trust others. So it starts by you trusting people and trusting people something and believing that they are going to deliver. And that's when you'll see the growth, because trust grows. It grows. It has got different levels.
To me, I think the concept of being a nomad, I mean, I am a nomad. I'm 8th generation expatriate. I was brought up in Africa. And so that's really my entire background. I got dropped off at an English boarding school here. 10 years later, I escaped to America and then went off to Japan. So I really have absolutely no place on earth that I call home or as a territory. I've got houses, but they're not really where I identify. And I think this is where I found it fascinating being with the different nomads in different parts of the world, because they had absolute clarity, they had their roles and responsibilities, but most importantly, they had their values.
Emmanuel, would you mind telling us, why is trust so important to the Maasai?
Oh, thank you so much, Anthony. This is a very important topic. It is also a broad topic, and needs a lot for me to explain to you in order for people to understand the meaning of trust. Can you imagine you not being trusted? Can you imagine living a life whereby nobody trusts you? The big question is, how can I be trusted? Everyone needs trust in order for us to live. But how do we earn trust? Trust comes from within. Do you trust other people? Do you merit, do you deserve to be trusted? Then what is that you must do in order for you, to earn that trust from other people? It is how you live, how you behave externally, how you behave internally, and then you win the trust. So trust in the Maasai community is the ability of one being able to win, the support of other people. Not being supervised, but people trust you. They can entrust you any work to do on behalf of them. And that's why we, the Maasai, when I say we, I'm talking about the whole community and not I. We means that I am working for the benefit of everyone in the community. So therefore, in a community like ours, trust is very important. It is a fundamental, value in our community. It helps us, to work without being commanded by anybody, without being supervised by anybody. And it takes the whole community to trust you and believe in you. It's a kind of a believing in someone. And therefore, if you are entrusted the trust, then how are you going to behave? Will you betray the trust that the community has given to you? Because sometimes betrayal can come in. And the reason why betrayal comes in is because of a temptation, sometimes of wealth. When you are in a position whereby, nobody is seeing you, you have control over many things belonging to the community, then you tend to lose the trust and you are tempted. But in our community, it is a discipline. Trust is a discipline that is encouraged by anybody, and that's how we have coexisted for many years. That's why I can talk about, on behalf of my tribe, anywhere else, and the community members, when they see that it is me talking about our culture, they trust. They trust me. They believe in me. It is a belief in somebody. So therefore, this discipline of, or this value of trust, it is a practice that is very important in every part of life, especially in work, especially when you are working, especially when you are working with everybody in the community. Because unless you are trustworthy, then the community becomes more weaker. If the trust grows, if the trust is, is brought into a higher level, then the performance of a community becomes more powerful, becomes more greater. The productivity of the community becomes higher, and therefore, hence, the sustainability of the community. So, I think, and I believe, I believe that trust is in the middle, in the center. It is in the center of life in our community. So without trust, we stop living, we start to die.
And I started to realize it's not where you come from or where you're going. It is what are the values that you take with you, and how can you then adapt to any situation. I mean, in Mongolian, there's a lovely expression, which is shit happens. How do you get on with it? You don't blame anybody. You don't blame the weather. You don't do this. You get on with it. And I think this is what I love about Nomads, is this incredibly practical approach to how do you solve the problem. And I remember being up in northern Kenya once, and I said, who's the leader around here? Who should I talk to about? And they just looked at me in disbelief and said, could you tell me the problem you're trying to solve? Because we have many different leaders. And I think this is sort of why I enjoy and why I like to believe I am a nomad, is because I believe I've got this adaptability. It is trying to analyze the problem, and that's the whole mapping process, which is once you have a map, you then have the context and clarity of the problem you're trying to solve. Because I think the whole area of leadership is simply solving problems. That's all it is.
Anthony, thank you. I'd like to come back to this point about Nomad. So was it conscious in you to say, I'm going to stay with fellow nomads, tribes that move and find a different home regularly? Was that a conscious decision?
No. It sort of evolved gradually. And I mean, I can tell you a little bit about that. I mean, I went on this camel. I mean, I remember being age of 6 in the 50s with my parents, sort of seeing the Maasai and just listening to my father talk about how he respected them. And then I went off on a camel safari for 21 days with 8 camels up in northern Kenya. And that was when each evening the nomads would wander into our little enclosure. And that is when I saw people who had absolute presence. They had substance without an iota of arrogance. And as I say, my entire education, or what I saw in the West, was how could you be massively arrogant with minimum substance? And that's when I became fascinated. So I sort of, because they hadn't got the education, but they'd got the presence. And I wondered why we had to blow ourselves up with the importance of our education and not by our contribution. So that's when I started to realize there's got to be something we can learn. And that is when I then decided to go off to Papua New Guinea. So I literally rang the embassy. Hello, Anthony Willoughby here. And the chap said, yes, I'm Jerry Ibarami. Please come round and come and meet me. So I went round to the embassy in Tokyo, of the Papua New Guinea embassy. And next day I got a call from Mr. Ibarami saying the ambassador would like to see you. So I went to see Joe Nombre with sort of pens stuck in his hair, chewing betel nut, and he sat down, he started talking about, he remembers first contact. And I started asking him, well, so what's it about? What are these values? I was still trying to find out about it. He said, why don't you go to my village? So I said, yeah, I'd love to go to your village. And that's when I saw them running around still in sort of arse grass and axes, and it was pretty interesting.
And because you don't strike me as a nomad, Anthony. You know what I mean? This provocation you say about the Western education that builds you up as an ego, perhaps without substance, and yet you're now challenging that kind of picture in my head of what a nomad might look like, because you absolutely are now, aren't you?
What, nomadic? Yeah, I'm completely nomadic. But again, I believe nomadism is a state of mind. And that's why I'm loving this disruption through COVID. Because so many people seem to have gone through life going into the middle rungs of Maslow and thinking they're self-actualizing because they have director on their name card and they've got a BMW. But actually they believe structure, status, stability, and they believe that's what they have built their lives on. It doesn't exist. It is a pure figment of people's imagination. And that's what I find so exciting now, is you have to survive without it. And there's a lovely expression a friend of mine came up with, is nomads cannot afford the complexity. You just cannot afford complexity. They have to see it simply. And that's what I believe you can do going forward.
Anthony, thank you. Talk to me about the Maasai, because I had the privilege of studying that at university. I did history and I studied the Maasai from the Maasai Mara. Tell me about leaders in the Maasai, because you know them, don't you?
Well, I think leadership is very, very interesting there. I remember, again, going back to sort of stories. I remember once asking, what is the point of education? And they said, well, an educated or a Maasai should never go hungry. So you've got to have the education and you've got to have your traditional values. And I think it is really learning about the leaders are there to protect the community. And as you get older, your responsibility, your authority, and your accountability, it changes. Whether it's a man or a woman or a girl or a boy, gradually your responsibility has to keep pace with how you contribute. And the concept is that every single person in the community is a leader. From the smallest child, they're looking after goats, they are leading. That is what I think is so important, is we have to realize leadership is the ability to contribute. And that is how you earn respect. You're given respect, you're given the spear, you're awarded the spear for protecting others. It's not what you say, it's what you do and how people see your behaviors.
What was triggering for me, I'm a sports coach, and I know the great teams that I've coached, and I've had the privilege of coaching teams that are national, European, and in fact, world champions. And your point about everyone's a leader, the truly great teams have a figurehead, but everyone has a leadership role. Everyone contributes to the decision-making process at any given stage.
Yeah.
And that struck me because, and rugby is a sport that I'm passionate about. And in Eddie Jones's book, he talks about a transition when teams become self-led.
Yeah.
That's the difference, that everyone's a leader, which is your fundamental point, isn't it?
It is, and it's a very difficult one for people to see, but that's something that they've got to be told and reassured, because, the human animal is a fairly vulnerable little thing. And somehow realizing how your small actions can actually contribute, I think, change people's perceptions on that. But it is very, very difficult to do, I agree. But as far as that sort of line of equality, I remember asking in Papua New Guinea, so who's the chief? And they say, it's Mr. Quinn, which means the English Queen, because it's the common market, the Commonwealth. And basically going, you can't fight with the Queen because the Queen is number one. So it doesn't matter who you think you are, you've got to be subservient. So I think, but as I say, it's around nomadic or the tribal work that I'm talking about. It's around looking at clarity. It's looking at the metaphor. I'm not saying we should become these people. It just gives us these points of reference around knowing your territory.
So tell me about the territory, because there are three elements we're going to talk about in terms of helping people take steps forward now.
Yeah.
Tell me about the territory first. What do you mean?
Well, I think I'll talk about the story with the ambassador. When I'd been in his village in Papua New Guinea, I actually sat down with him at the dinner table, and I remember actually going off to the loo and saying, I've got the question for him. So I thought, right, what is the most important thing in his life? Thinking he would say his car, his family, I don't know what it would be. And he just looked at me, banged on the table and said, it is my territory. And from the age of 3, I knew how to protect it. And that is what he then drew out, and he explained his friends. But then what he put on that, he knew his duty and he knew his aims and ambitions. And I thought it was fascinating, this concept of duty, because it's knowing really what you're protecting that is so important. And from there, from knowing your territory, that's when I started going off on a series of expeditions. And as far as knowing your territory, I then got some people in Papua New Guinea to draw the maps of their world. And they drew the crocodile hunters, the farms, they drew where they, so that everything was what they knew was where their world was and where they hunted and gathered. And then that was when Thomson Reuters, or Dan Vedetto said, I've got 2 teams coming together. It's not team building I want, they don't know each other. So I said, can I try this idea and ask them to draw their territory? He said, yeah, of course you can. And what became fascinating was when I asked these people from Thomson and Reuters to draw their territory, they all drew mammoths, rivers, mountains, and farms. And I was just staggered to see inside people there was this map. And once they could identify what they were trying to achieve, then they could start to define the territory that they were operating in. So then they had a metaphor of, have we got the right weapons? How far away is it? Is it in the thicket? And all of this geographical points of reference that we've been using for 99.95% of human existence came through in talking about territory.
And Anthony, that's the value you've brought us as a business. You've given us that metaphor. We've done our territory map, our duty, but we've also mapped what could be our territory somewhere out there across some ravine that we have to bridge.
Yeah.
So we've territory mapped. And then what's this mammoth hunt about? Give me an idea of what that's all about.
Yes, a mammoth hunt to me is, again, people ask me, well, mammoths are dead. Why would you hunt mammoths? Surely it's nasty. You shouldn't be really hunting. And really the mammoth hunting grew from the very, very first mapping session I ever did. And that is that they drew mammoths. And what I found out was, as soon as you got people to say, what is the mammoth they're hunting, instantly it creates a language. And that is really what we're using, a language of where is the mammoth, how far away is it? And it seems to cross all cultures, all nationalities, and all backgrounds, once you can identify what it is you're actually chasing.
And Anthony, just to build on that, my language around that, it's what's the big thing?
Yep.
As simple as that. What's the big thing you should be focusing on now, or you must focus on for whatever reason? That's what a mammoth is, and it's different for everyone, and it's different for every business.
Correct. But then you've got a point of reference, and you've got a language, and you've got a vocabulary. No, it's not a mammoth, it's a rabbit. You know, and all of a sudden, so we need a net. What do we need? So it just tries to de-jargonize the conversation. And I think what everybody is so fed up with is this jargon, because you can't get it across in a Zoom conference. You really can't. So they've got to just keep it really simple.
And inspired by you, behind me, you might not have seen it.
I've seen it. I was going to mention that.
That's note to self, by the way. Every time I walk into my office, it says, focus on your mammoth.
Yeah.
And that's really useful, as you say, simple language. But I'm so multitasky as a person, juggling so many different things. How many of those things are mammoths? Not many.
Yeah.
So Mark, note to self, focus on your mammoth.
Yeah, but I think you've also got to realize at this time, a lot of the mammoths have vanished deep in the thicket. And I think it's very depressing as you get to that ravine. You suddenly realize that actually you've got to go round, and because the whole thing about migration and nomads is following the animals. But it's not you moving the animals, it's the animals knowing where to move naturally. And I think this is the main question to ask, is where are your customers migrating to? Are they frightened at the moment? Are they greedy? What is the mental state and the sense of dynamic movement of your animals? Because a lot of what people have done over the years is they've created farms and agriculture as if it's static, secure, and everything else. That no longer exists because those floods have come through and wiped it away, the agriculture. So therefore, the mammoths and what you're doing, it requires a totally different dynamic mindset. And these maps we draw are dynamic. They're arrows, they're movement, they change. And on a daily basis, I think that's what's evolving. 6 weeks ago, it was a different map. There's a new map.
And it's fascinating because this all resonates with me, Anthony. I've got some of my bigger, important customers don't know. So they don't know where they're going, and they're searching for answers. So your point, which is fundamental here, is get on the journey with them then. Understand where they're at and partner now, rather than think you understand where they're at, think you know where they might be going. So this is truly about working together with your mammoth, if it's a big customer, for example, and coming up with solutions collaboratively.
Definitely. Nobody has got a clue at the moment. There's an expression again with the nomads when they say the small boy sees the hyena first. And I think it really is. There's nobody who knows what is really going to happen with this whole situation. So therefore, it's move quietly, move gently, listen to people, listen to everybody who can help you come up with a solution. And I think this is where you're going to need leaders who've got humility. Because if a leader tells you what you should be doing, they don't know. So therefore, they have absolutely no authority or personal identity or personal authority or authenticity if they tell you what's going to happen, because they don't know.
And this leads beautifully, Anthony, into hunting parties.
Yeah.
Tell me what a hunting party is and why it's so important.
Well, I think, again, it's trying to de-jargonize business conversation. And in fact, if you look at history, going back to mammoth hunting, apparently, when we started hunting mammoths, it was the first time we had to really work as teams. And once we could actually bring down a mammoth, then we could use their skin, their bones, and we could look at it. So we could really start having a community away from the caves. And I think what it also does, it then gets people to talk about their different strengths and weaknesses. How far away is it? Who knows it best? Who's got the road to it? What do we do? And then you can start to really break down how far away it is and the different skills that you need to bring it in. I mean, if you're talking to the FD, it's going to be very different than talking to the managing director or the sales director at the moment. They're on different maps. So therefore, once you can start to identify who's got the best connection, who knows the animal best, and it's all, I believe, the sort of subliminal, it's not the facts, it's who can inspire people to talk about things in a way that you can come up with the solutions.
Anthony, thank you. Just to summarize, the three main things we've talked about in terms of what companies and teams and individuals can do. Map your territory.
Yes, and I think the mapping of your territory is done with others. It's not your map, It is a combined map, because once you've drawn the map, everybody's perception of the threats, opportunities, barriers, and taboos that have to be broken is different. So what this does, it creates an honest platform for people to be honest and talk about their fears.
Thank you. And number two, it's define your mammoths.
I think very much, but again, that is not you to do as a leader. It is to ask other people, what do you think we should be doing? And use that as a way of listening and encouraging and giving people hope. Because what I think we all want to do is to be listened to and to feel that someone is giving us the hope that they're going to help and we can help them.
Thank you. So this is all collaborative.
Yeah.
And then the next element, the third thing we talked about, is hunting parties. In terms of a final perspective from you, Anthony, talk to me more about weapons. That's a lovely language about how do you bring this mammoth down. What do you mean by that?
I think, though, this is where we've got to be really careful, because a lot of what we've been talking about is very male dominated. And I think this has always been a problem. So weapons, etc. I've never had a problem with the women drawing the maps, or there's normally far, far more insights from women when they're drawing the maps and how they see things. But I think there's also this other area that we're always focused on the weapon, and we want to go on a mammoth hunt and we want to do all these sorts of things. But what I really think is in the old days is, frankly, it was the men who wrote the history. So yes, we're all big mammoth hunters, but I think a lot of it was, yeah, we've got the weapons, we're going to go and hunt mammoths. And about sort of 3 weeks later, people come back bloodied and muddy and everything else. And, they say, well, we got that close to the mammoth. Have you got any berries? So I think it is really, this is around equality and realizing everybody is a very, very, very important part of it. So keep away from the weapons or what we need. It's much more around how can we domesticate the mammoth. We don't want to hunt mammoths. What we actually want is a herd of cows. Mm-hmm. We want to be able to look after our customers. So in a way, it's to focus people out, so then they can start making common sense, sensible comments. We don't need weapons. We don't want to spend too much time on weapons. They're dangerous. They're difficult. Let us work as a collective team and to work in partnership with our customers.
So it's interesting, because what's triggering in my brain, Anthony, is that actually we can substitute the word weapons for skills. And, you talk about listening skills. You talk about collaboration as a mindset and as a flow. So it's much more about that. It's access what you need to access to be able to influence what is really important. The mammoth, it's very important.
I would agree. I would say at the moment, 90% of what people need now are communication skills and listening skills. It's not around dashing out after a new customer. It is working with the ones you have to help them to earn their respect, to earn their trust, and to give them hope. And that is what I think is really, really critical. But you can start the beginning of that discussion by saying, let's talk about mammoths. But actually, what you're really trying to do is to get people to feel they're involved, respected, belong, they're recognized, and their leadership ability and insights are being recognized in this world in a way that's exciting and different.
Thank you. I want to come back to your point you made earlier about equality, because in my experience, if your hunting party isn't extremely diverse in every sense of that word, it's not going to be as effective.
It definitely won't be. And, it's again, the goat herder needs the warrior needs, and it is totally interdependent. You can't, there's no sense of, giving entitlement. No, there is not entitlement. There is how are you going to contribute? How are you going to help? How are you going to inspire? How do you develop those leadership skills? So really the mammoth hunting skills, I believe, as you were pointing out, are pretty much all soft skills. The humility of authority, the earned leadership, the contribution to your community, the collaboration, and focus on that, the problems can probably be solved quite easily.
Anthony, thank you so much for your time, for the language that you shared with us as well, because it's a new language that I'm finding hugely useful, as you can see by my notes to myself.
Yeah.
It's helping me tremendously clarify what's important and what I should do about it. So thank you.
Well, I'm delighted. But again, it's a brave person who takes on this idea, because it's the leader requiring to say, I need to be humble. I no longer have authority. All I can ask is for people to contribute, and I will do my best to earn your respect by how I can help you. And I think it is a completely new style of leadership that we all need.
I couldn't agree more. In fact, our next Boostcast is with Ali Stewart, who you know.
All right, fantastic.
She's an author of a book called Liberating Leadership, so it flows beautifully from this session. And she's going to be on Thursday's Boostcast, so it's perfect.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.